Finally, some of the first honesty that we've seen from the US President Joe Biden about Israel's genocidal onslaught against Gaza, which he has directly facilitated, of course, from day one. In an interview with Time magazine, he was asked, "Some in Israel have suggested that Netanyahu is prolonging the war for his own political self-preservation. Do you believe that?" He responded, "I'm not going to comment on that. There is every reason for people to draw that conclusion." I like that. It's funny. I'm not going to comment on that. Immediately comments and offers the main takeaway of the entire interview. Look, if I'm honest, that is amongst the most lucid parts of that particular interview. Amongst other things, he refuses to answer one question with a response, "If I tell you, you'll write it, it's not time for you to write it." He mixes up, apparently, the Chinese ruler with Vladimir Putin. When asked about his age in the context of running for a second term as president, he says, "I can do it better than anybody you know. You're looking at me. I can take you too." He approvingly refers to a phone conversation with the murderous war criminal Henry Kissinger a few days before he died, and then says, and he used the following comment. He said that not since Napoleon has Europe not looked over their shoulder at dread with what Russia may do until now you can't let change. I must ask you, what does that mean? Various kind of negatives, slightly confusing forms of phraseology. Europe presumably isn't looking at dread at Europe. If he means Russia, then why refer to Napoleon, Emperor of the French Empire, who got defeated while trying to invade Russia? If he means Russia, well, to be fair, there was a lot more dread in, I don't know, what the Cold War, but whatever. I'm not sure he knew what he was saying there, if we are honest. Now, the fact Biden has conceded what he must know, even as he refutes particular claims of genocide, is that this horrendously murderous war is being likely dragged out because of the perverse self-interest of Israel's ruler is disturbing, given he has thrown all the weapons at Israel that it needs to make that happen, butchering tens of thousands in the process. So why then is the same White House trying to claim that a peace deal that Joe Biden claimed was Israel's peace deal, which then Israel's leader Benjamin Netanyahu and his allies started publicly tearing to pieces? Why did it claim that was being blocked by Hamas, despite Hamas having already outlined and supported almost the same peace deal a few weeks ago, which Israel publicly rejected and then went on to slaughter a lot more innocent people in the process, not least in Rafah, when they burned alive and decapitated children with their weapons? I appreciate that's all confusing, but by definition it is deeply confusing, because when we have to sift through this level of gaslighting and deception and distortion, it becomes quite hard to actually neatly package what the hell is actually happening. Does anyone have an answer? None of this is apologism for Hamas, it's just stating a fact. Last month, Hamas said it had accepted a ceasefire deal proposed by Egypt and Qatar, which would involve a ceasefire in stages where Hamas would release hostages, Israel would release prisoners and pull troops back from Gaza, humanitarian aid would be allowed in, while Palestinian civilians would be allowed to return to whatever remains of their homes. There would then be a return to a sustainable calm, which is defined as a permanent cessation of military and hostile operations. That is, ending this so-called war. So then Biden comes out with a deal which is basically identical and claims it's an Israeli deal. Weird. Now, given Israel has failed in its military objectives, returning the hostages by military means, having killed far more hostages than they've rescued, with significant releases only coming through ceasefire and exchange, or indeed they have failed to defeat Hamas, which has an endless supply of recruits thanks to Israel's genocidal onslaught. You keep having Hamas restoring control over areas which Israel had previously claimed Hamas had been defeated in. On top of the fact that the Israeli state is more isolated and frankly reviled globally than it's ever been, you'd think maybe it's time for Israel to call its losses. So Biden comes out and offers a deal which he claims is Israeli and demands Hamas accepts it, and then they say they view the proposal positively. Not that surprising, given it's pretty much the same as the one they already accepted weeks ago. Then Netanyahu comes out and casts doubt on the deal, declaring there won't be a permanent ceasefire in Gaza until Hamas is destroyed, so thus crushing a pretty central element of the deal, I would say. Indeed, Netanyahu says his conditions for ending the war haven't changed, the destruction of Hamas's military and governing capability, and says Israel will continue to insist these conditions are met before a permanent ceasefire is put in place. For some reason, Hamas won't accept a condition of we must be permanently destroyed before there's a ceasefire with us, which would be redundant anyway because we would be destroyed. I know, weird, which is, as I've said, is a nonsense, because the key cause of all this violence in any case is the brutal subjugation of the Palestinian people, which Hamas obviously feed off. But in any case, they've clearly suffered thousands of losses in terms of their fighters, but equally people keep joining them because they have this objection to their homes being incinerated, with their loved ones slaughtered, many of them kids being butchered and horribly maimed. Weirdly, that offers an endless supply of recruits for a force fighting against those responsible. I know, weird. Don't have to be military experts who worked that out, or even just be aware of every historical precedent going. It's common sense that was going to happen, wasn't it? Now, Netanyahu's even more extreme partners, principally Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, and the national security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, have threatened to resign and collapse the government if Netanyahu signs up to it. Members of Netanyahu's ruling Likud party have also threatened to resign over it too. So now let's listen to the US State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller. Always a pleasure, never a chore.
It offers a roadmap for a permanent ceasefire and an end to the crisis. The world should know, the Palestinian people should know, that the only thing standing in the way of an immediate ceasefire today is Hamas. The proposal on the table is nearly identical to what Hamas said it would accept just a few weeks ago, and it is now time for them to act. It is time for them to accept the deal. It is time to finalize this agreement and put an end to the suffering of Israelis and Palestinians alike.
So he says the only thing standing in the way of an immediate ceasefire is Hamas. The only thing. Even if he was going to say Hamas haven't properly signed up to it, could he really justify the claim they're the only reason? As he notes, they already backed a deal that's nearly identical. So Matt, why didn't that deal happen then? If, as you know, Hamas backed it, what happened? Surely if they're the only roadblock, there'd be peace by now. Matt? Hello? Hi. Are you there, Matt? Matt, I'm trying to have a conversation with you. Answer the question. To be fair, he can't hear me. He's unlikely to be a subscriber for a start. His loss. This is purely a rhetorical exercise on my part. Now, I mean just now to return to Joe Biden's time interview because he's quoted in response to the question, and whose fault is it that that deal, the ceasefire for hostages, has not been consummated? Is it Hamas or Israel or both? And he says, Hamas could end this tomorrow. Hamas could say, unintelligible and done, period. Cool. That's really helpful. Thanks, Joe. I had all sorts of questions, but that's certainly answered those. The clarity in situations of one piece, life and death on a colossal scale, is what I think is truly appreciated here from the most powerful man on earth. Let's be clear, they're all clearly gaslighting us here. I mean, for a start, we need clarity, by the way, on the claim by Osama Hamdan, one of Hamas's leaders, that Israel's response conveyed to them involved reopening all files and didn't accord with what Biden said. I'm certainly not here to pass off Hamas claims as facts. That claim needs to be interrogated. We need some clarity. But the question is it the same deal which Biden has proposed just a few days ago? Now, what was outlined should be accepted. Israel's genocidal onslaught must be ended. The Israeli hostages which were taken, and that was a serious war crime, who are still alive must be returned to their loved ones. Palestinian prisoners must be released. Humanitarian aid needs to get into Gaza to stop famine. We could go on. But let's be clear here. Israel has lost, badly lost. My big fear, however, is this. This may only end up being a pause with the genocidal rampage only to continue, but also the possibility of a war with Lebanon looms, with one Israeli leader demanding that it all burns. That is the total destruction of Lebanon. Their genocidal aspirations are not simply contained to Gaza. This, I fear, has a long way to run. But anything that stops this horror in Gaza in the here and now should be welcome. So let's dare to dream, but never give up on our critical faculties or stop holding those who have committed terrible crimes with direct complicity of a government to account. Please like and subscribe. Do help us take on, as ever, the pro-war media at patreon.com/Andres84. Listen to the podcast. Speak to you soon.